All right, welcome back, everybody, for another episode of Diabetes 180. So excited to be with you here tonight. As usual, let us know in the chat that you're here. We always like to greet our live guests, even though this is going to be made available for recording for anyone watching on the replay. So if you have questions, especially about our topic tonight, which is 3 steps to lower fasting blood sugar levels. Let us know in the chat where you're struggling with your diabetes journey. We're here to help. We're here every Monday at 7 p.m. to answer questions. So you should set your schedule in advance. If particularly you are interested in using a plant-based approach to reversing your diabetes, or if you have type 1 diabetes, the priority there is to reverse insulin resistance, lower your medication needs, and insulin dose. And if you have type 2 diabetes, of course, your goal is the same, reversing insulin resistance, with the goal of coming off of all medications and getting your A1C to below diabetic levels, which we're doing every week with our clients in our coaching program. So yeah, so just as a general announcement, set your calendar, make sure you're hitting the reminder when you're subscribed to our YouTube or Facebook channel. Make sure there should be a reminder option. We also send out emails. So if anyone personally isn't getting invitations to these lives, or if you know someone who needs invitations to these lives, then of course let me know. We could put them on send them an email, and make sure they're part of our newsletter. But let's get started, okay? So 3 steps to lower blood sugar levels. Let me know if you are struggling with fasting blood sugar levels being high. And I know the frustration, something I experienced when my wife had diabetes, waking up in the morning after fasting 10, 12, sometimes 16 hours, and her sugars are high. Even when you don't eat anything, right? Maybe you ate just a salad for dinner and you're waking up in the morning and your blood sugar is high. And you're like, what's the deal? It can be very frustrating. I get that. So what we're going to try to do is, first off, explain why that's happening. Why can a person, even in a fasted state, wake up with their blood sugar being high, regardless of what they ate last night or did not eat? It can be puzzling. So we're going to cover that, but more importantly, we're going to talk about what to do. The steps you can take right now to start normalizing your fasting blood sugar levels. Normalizing fasting blood sugar levels is actually one of the first signs that you're getting better, that your diabetes is getting better. Specifically, if you're normalizing those fasting blood sugar levels through healthy lifestyle changes and not medication. Because of course, there's one approach you can take is up your insulin dose, up your medication dose, and that can normalize or help drive down those blood sugar levels. But we know that's not making the disease any better. Okay. So what we're going to focus on with these 3 steps of our natural ways to lower blood sugar levels in the morning. And if you are successful in implementing this plan, and you start to see normal blood sugar levels in the morning, that is the first sign that you are reversing insulin resistance. So that's where we are going to start. So why we wake up in the morning and notice our blood sugar is high, even when we haven't eaten, is simply insulin resistance, but more specifically, insulin resistance in our liver. See, our liver's job is to make sure every cell of our body is fed when we're in a fasted state. So think about this. The reason we eat, right, is to feed our cells. Morning, breakfast, lunch, dinner, anytime you're sitting down to eat a meal, everything you ate goes into hungry cells, right? But think of Pac-Man. Those cells are running around looking for nutrients all day long. But what happens when you close the refrigerator door, right? What happens when you stop eating? Your cells need to eat still, right? Your brain still needs to function, right? I don't know if you guys ever experienced a brain fog that happens when you haven't eaten anything for 24 hours, right? You still need food, and that's where the liver comes into play. So the liver's job, among many jobs, is to what's called hepatic glucose output, or liver glucose output, to put glucose into the blood, right? So through hepatic glucose output, the liver's job is to sense that there's no nutrients coming in. Our cells still need to eat, especially our hungry brain, right? And so it trickles sugar into the blood like an IV, right? To feed your hungry cells when you're not eating. So it should make sense to us that even without eating, right? You can prick your finger and still know, or if you're on a continuous glucose monitor, experience blood sugar highs. Now, why does a person like me who doesn't have diabetes not experience highs, right? When I'm fasting, right? When I'm checking my blood sugar levels, is because what happens in a normal physiological response to this occurrence is we have background insulin. That's the long acting insulin that works in all of us to suppress or turn off the liver. So the pancreas can sense when there's the sugar is getting a little high, right? The liver needs to be calmed down, and in essence, the pancreas sends out insulin to shut the faucet off, right? To turn the liver off and say, okay, liver, we've got enough sugar in our blood, right? All the cells are satisfied. You can stop making more sugar. Now, what happens if your liver is resisting insulin? If your liver is resisting insulin, now when insulin tries to shut the liver off, it doesn't shut off. It doesn't stop, right? And the pancreas starts to stream louder and louder to try to get the liver to shut off its glucose output. But what happens in liver insulin resistance is that it keeps on resisting, right? It's not listening to insulin. So when you wake up in the morning and you check your sugars, it's high, even though the insulin is doing its job or trying to shut the liver off. If we're going to be more specific, though, why our liver is becoming resistant to insulin is because of liver fat. So, how many of us are familiar with fatty liver disease? Okay, fatty liver disease, what's often called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. It's actually what it used to be called. They changed the name. I can't remember what's now, but fatty liver disease. I think it's something about metabolic syndrome. A metabolic syndrome related is in the title. So we know that as the percentage of fat increases in our liver, this can directly interfere with its ability to respond to insulin. Okay, so this is actually very concerning because as a physician assistant myself, I'm often checking liver enzymes, right, with routine lab work. But you can have fatty liver disease with normal blood work, meaning every year you're going to check your blood work, and your doctor tells you your liver looks good, but we really don't know if you have fatty liver disease without advanced imaging or a biopsy, right? So if you're not getting that done, you can have fatty liver disease, and studies show that up to 80% of diabetics have fatty liver disease, which is why many diabetics experience high morning blood sugar levels, as the liver fat is preventing insulin from being recognized in the morning. All right, so I hope I'm making sense. I'm gonna share my on my screen here to show you some studies that show how directly correlated this liver fat is to your insulin resistance. Okay, so let's get into that. And again, like I said, we're talking about the problem, but we're going to get into the solution too. Okay, so this is a study that kind of really shows you the dose response. Like, so this is based on hyperinsulinemic euglycemic clamp tests. This is basically the gold standard test to sense how insulin sensitive you are. So this test is specifically measuring the insulin sensitivity of an individual. Okay, and we're not, for time's sake, we won't go into the details of how they do it. But if you look at these graphs, this is showing you a direct response between insulin sensitivity and liver fat, in that as liver fat goes down in each of these graphs, insulin sensitivity also goes up, right? So as liver fat goes down, and also muscle fat, so they're testing the fat in the liver as well as the muscle, as liver fat goes down and muscle fat goes down, insulin sensitivity goes up. So what does that tell us? That tells us that as we get rid of this liver fat, our sensitivity to insulin can improve. In other words, we can reverse insulin resistance by reducing the fat in our liver, which again, of course, is the goal of our live tonight, to improve our fasting blood sugar levels, which will, in the long run, show us that we are heading in the right direction in reducing our A1C. Okay, which is one of the first signs of reduction of A1C is your morning blood sugars are improving. So The first thing to do, of course, to lower liver fat, is to lose weight. I mean, that shouldn't be a surprise to anybody, right? And I'm sure you're going to say, "Well, Lewis, duh," right? I know if I lose some weight, that makes sense. So that's the first thing. If you know you're overweight, losing weight, even small amounts, we're talking 5 to 7% of your body fat, your body weight, sorry, can reduce and drastically improve the amount of fat in your liver. But what if you're a normal sized individual? What if you're not obese, right? Or you're close to normal weight? You can still have fatty liver, right? So it's so important for us to focus on these next three steps, because these three steps make it so that we are reducing specifically body fat. Okay. Right. So there's many ways to lose weight. Not every method reduces body fat significantly, right? So when we're losing weight, we're seeing the scale drop. We want to make sure that we're losing the right type of weight. That is weight coming from fat stores. Okay. So first thing to do, okay, is to decrease our certain dietary sources of food that increase our storage of fat. Okay. So what sources of food? Well, let's look at the studies. Let's see what the studies say. What sources of food should we limit to decrease the amount of fat in our body? Anyone have any guesses? Anyone watching second guess what food sources cause our body to store fat? And so by reducing them, we can yeah, decrease liver fat. Let us know in the chat if you have a guess. All right, but so there's three sources of fatty liver. Okay, so I guess this is a step one of our three-step process, right? So step one, of course, losing weight would be kind of step 1A, and then step 1B would be this, right? This is going to help recognize the three sources of fatty liver are excess dietary sugar, excess dietary fat, which shouldn't be a surprise, right? And excess body fat. Okay. So by decreasing excess dietary sugar, dietary fat, and excess body fat, we are reducing the fat stored in our liver. The body fat part is obvious, right? As we lose body fat, our body's not, because what one thing the body does in its many places that it stores fat is it trickles excess fatty acids into the blood, which can end up in the liver. So feeding an already overstuffed liver. So we want to decrease excess body fat. We're going to focus on the top two though, at reducing dietary sugar and dietary fat. Someone said fried food, someone said carbohydrates. So you're both kind of right, right? So fried food for sure, because of excess fat. You're frying it in what? You're frying it in oil, you are frying it in fat. And then oh, that's Amina. Okay, hey Amina, it's been so long since I seen you. I just saw the face. I said, oh, I know that person. All right, awesome. I'm so glad you're here tonight. And Antoinette says carbs. So let's be more specific when we say carbs, right? Let's go into detail. So what do the studies show? So this is actually a study on adolescents with fatty liver. Okay. So they took a group of adolescent boys with fatty liver disease, and for 8 weeks put them on a diet that's low in free sugar. That's your refined carbs. So we're specifically singling out simple or refined sugars. That's a sugar that's added to foods. Okay. Not the sugar that's found naturally in a complex matrix, when we find them freely in nature, right? So when we're talking about carbs, we want to make sure we're specifying carbs from complex sources, meaning your fruits, your vegetables, including starchy vegetables, right? Legumes, intact whole grains, so oatmeal, quinoa, brown rice, things like that, that haven't been stripped of their fiber and been highly refined. Those are good carbs. When we talk about free sugars or simple sugars, we're talking about basically the refinement of carbs that brings it down to make it that pure white deadly stuff that you could use to sweeten pastries and drinks and just about everything, right? So look at your food labels. Look at the ingredient list. If there's sugar there, or sometimes they have other clever names to hide it, that's what they're talking about with this free sugar, added sugars. So they put these adolescents on a diet that's low in free sugar for 8 weeks, and just 8 weeks of low free sugar, a diet low in free sugar. It led to a significant improvement in liver fat. So that should tell us one thing: get rid of the refined sugar, which I think is obvious. Most of us probably knew that, but I'm gonna show you. Keep watching because you'll probably be surprised what even more important thing to do is. All right. So what about this study? In this study, they actually took adults who are overweight um, and non-diabetic. All right. So these were non-diabetic, overweight individuals, and they put them on to one of two diets: a high-fat diet or a low fat diet. The high fat diet consisted of about 56% of their calories coming from fat. The low fat diet participants had a diet of 16% coming from fat, and they equalized their calories. So, in other words, for the 2 weeks they were part of the study, they ate the same amount of calories every day. The only difference being the percentage of those calories, what they were made of, right? 16 versus 56% of fat. Okay. And I should pause here and say that this 15 or 16% is what we recommend in diabetes 180 to reverse insulin resistance and come off medications. To measure and track your fat intake is very important. So it's interesting that in this study, that's what they chose as a low fat mark or goal. And what happened after 2 weeks? In the high fat group with 56% of the calories coming from fat, they increased a 35% increase in their liver fat. That's in just 2 weeks. All right, just 2 weeks. And their insulin levels increased by 15%. What that means is they became more insulin resistant, right? If your insulin levels rise, that means your pancreas is working overtime to produce insulin as your cells are resisting it. So a rise in insulin levels is not a good thing. And that's what the high fat diet did. Okay. And then the opposite happened with the low fat diet. If this would change, yeah, the low fat diet, 16% of total calories within just 2 weeks, 20% drop in liver fat, and 15% drop in insulin levels, showing, of course, again, that they had a reversal of their insulin resistance in just 2 weeks of eating low fat foods or low fat diet. So that should tell us a lot. And now I know many people may be watching when we think, maybe saying to me, well, my doctor, or I look online and on social media tells me I should eat more protein and more fat, because when I eat more protein and more fat, my sugars are going to improve. And then you go out, you eat a low carb or a keto diet, and your sugars do improve, right? And anyone watching can attest to that. And we've experienced that in our own home. That when you eat a low carb keto diet, your sugars improve. But this is the problem, right? As in the moment, and I'm sure you could also attest to this, the moment you step aside from that diet, you say you want to eat cereal one day, or you want to eat a potato, or you want to eat a watermelon. I don't know, it's hot outside, someone hands you a watermelon, check your blood sugar, and it's through the roof. It's higher than it's ever been. Why? Because it's if you are eating high fat, high protein diet, you are not reversing insulin resistance. You're masking it. And this is shown or proven with the fact that the moment you step outside your diet, even a little bit, your body responds by saying, "What are you doing? We don't even work with carbs," right? Insulin doesn't know what to do with those carbs, and the carbs stay stuck in the blood, right? So you are not eating to reverse insulin resistance and eating a high fat diet. All you're doing is masking the symptoms of diabetes, right? By limiting your carb intake. That's, of course, your sugars are going to be low, right? We don't want to do that. We don't want to mask symptoms. We don't want to put a band-aid on this disease, right? And on top of the fact that high fat, high animal protein diets are linked to cancer, heart disease, and premature death. Many studies back that. Okay, and we talk about these studies a lot in our channel. So long term, not a good idea. It's not reversing your diabetes. It's only masking the symptoms. It's much better to eat in a way that will improve your insulin sensitivity, improve your tolerance of carbs, so you could eat carbs without spikes and go back to eating a normal diet, right? Without fear of what's going to happen when I eat carbs, right? Now I can eat carbs in abundance. This is what happens when we eat low fat, right? When we get the fat out of the liver. And it doesn't take long, just 2 weeks. I don't know if you guys are surprised as I was to see the study, but just 2 weeks is all it took. So this is another study that highlights the importance of being specific in what type of fat we are lowering. Okay, so now we're going to get into even more detail in talking about what type of fat is the problematic fat. Okay, so in this study, subjects were overfed with an equal number of calories. So what that means is everyone in the study was given a diet that was had too much calories. So I think it was about 1,000 calories over what they should eat. Right? If you overfeed anybody calories, their fat is going to rise inside the liver. But what they did is they split the group into a saturated fat group. So one group was eating coconut oil, animal foods, cheese, right? Foods that are higher in saturated fat. Another group was eating foods high in unsaturated fat, right? So you're talking about olive oil, plant sources of fat like avocado, higher sources of unsaturated fat. And then the third group was eating straight sugar, right? So foods that had a lot of added simple sugar in those meals or foods. And what happened? So after uh, just 3 weeks, the group that focused on saturated fat increased their liver fat by 55%. Right? 3 weeks, their liver fat increased by 55%. The unsaturated fat group also had a rise in liver fat, but only by 15%. And the simple sugars were somewhere in the middle at 33%. So, looking at these numbers, which is the more problematic source of I should say, yeah, calories, that when it comes to fattying up your liver, is it sugar or is it fat? And more specifically, this study is telling us it's saturated fat. Saturated fat by far is the main thing we need to lower if we're trying to unfatty our liver. Okay. And the cool thing about it is that it can happen very fast. So, again, as we promote on this channel, by eating more whole plant foods, you are eliminating the main source of saturated fat because most saturated fat foods are animal foods or byproducts of animal foods like cheese and dairy. So you're doing great if you're eating plant based. All right, and when it comes to saturated fat. So that's the first thing. All right, I think that probably if we just did that, that would be great, right? We could stop there and see great results. But the next thing that you can do is focus on your meal timing. Okay, so before I go into this study, um, I want to highlight that many of us are probably practicing intermittent fasting, right? If let me know in the chat if you guys are doing intermittent fasting. Let me know what times you're fasting. I know about a year ago or a couple years ago, I did a survey online to see what times are people fasting. And I was curious about it because I myself fast. Well, not these days, but periodically I'll fast. And when I did the survey, I was doing intermittent fasting, and the popular window was 12 p.m. to 8 p.m. or 12 p.m. to 7 p.m. or something like that, where people would push breakfast out until like the afternoon, their first meal, and then cut off their meal times in the evening. Anyone doing the 12 to 8 window, let me know. But I don't want to discourage you if that's what's working for you and you're doing that, keep doing that. Intermittent fasting has great benefits, but I want us to think about something. When is our body designed to use calories the most? Think about this. Now we're going into chronobiology, okay, and circadian rhythms. We are most designed to consume calories and use them when we are most active. Right? In other words, our metabolism is fastest during certain parts of the day, the times you are active. When are you most active? When is your body most active? In the morning, right? In the daytime, the daylight hours, our body is most active. So our metabolism is up, right? In the evening, our body wants to rest and digest. Our metabolism is down. So if we are eating early in the morning, any calories we eat early in the morning is we're going to burn more of those calories than if we eat that same meal at night. And this has actually been shown in studies. When you eat you could eat one meal for breakfast, right, and check your blood sugar, and eat that same meal at dinner and check your blood sugar. And that same meal that you ate at dinner will be higher. Your blood sugar will be higher because you ate it at dinner than when you ate it in the morning, right? So in other words, we know that insulin resistance rises in the evening. So if we're going to practice intermittent fasting or time restricted eating, I bet I like that term better, then we should cut off our eating windows by 6 p.m. That's the second step to reverse liver fat. Cut off your eating window by eating no later than 6 p.m. That's the best way to eat for insulin sensitivity. Eating at the time that your body is most sensitive to insulin will make it so that less food is stored as fat, right? If we're eating late, unfortunately, m- there's going to be more calories that's going to end up in our liver as fat. All right. Someone said that they're fasting 24 hours, doing 24-hour fast. That's awesome. Great. Audrey, Kitchen Wall Phone says, I fast early evening to 8 a.m. All right. Good. Fasting early evening. You're doing the right thing right there. So, I think that could be hard to adjust. I definitely know when I learned this and I had to adjust my fasting hours, man, that was hard, because you're so used to eating late, especially if you're a person that works late hours or you're going to bed late, but work on that. Let that be a goal to cut off your eating time earlier the better, to maximize insulin sensitivity and work with your circadian or chronobiological clock, right? In eating to maximize insulin sensitivity. Great question. How many hours to fast? It really doesn't matter, right? So, um, according to what works best for you. So there's different methods of fasting. Some people are fasting for 16 hours, right? And some people are fasting for 20. Some people are fasting even longer than that, maybe doing 24-hour windows where they only eat once a day, around one big meal in a day. But the most important thing is that the timing to consider is the timing of that meal you're eating, whether it's one meal or two meals. Try to eat them before 6 p.m. is what rule I usually give. Before 6 p.m. Cut off the kitchen, no matter how many hours you're planning on fasting. Okay. So yeah, we're almost out of time. I always try to keep these lives at just 30 minutes as respect to you guys, because I know we live very busy schedules. This is just a power half hour. We got one more step to cover. Please let me know if you have questions before we go into it. But the last step is really simple. Oh, actually, I should show you the study before I go into the last step. This is a study that kind of highlights this importance of step two. So in this study, showed that, and what they did is basically compare different time restricted windows, and they noticed that fasting blood sugar levels in adults that's a typo, in adults with pre-diabetes were lower when they ate within 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. window than when they ate from 12 to 9 p.m. window, which makes sense, right? So and that's what we're talking about in this live tonight is fasting blood sugar levels. If we're going to improve our fasting blood sugar levels, we will do better to eat earlier and cut off eating earlier, right? So don't skip breakfast and cut off our last meal in the early evening hours. That's the best way to maximize insulin sensitivity, working with our circadian rhythm and chronobiological clock, and uh, improving our fasting blood sugar levels. So, what about the third step? The third step really is my favorite, and that's exercise. Okay, so what's interesting is that a lot of people tell me they don't have time to exercise, I don't have time to work out, but really, you can at least tell me and anybody, if you disagree, please let me know. Do you think that you can go for a 15-minute walk after you eat? Just 15 minutes. Can you give me that? Because just that can be enough to help you lower your fasting blood sugar levels. Okay. I get it. Not all of us have a time to go into the gym every day or go on a 45-minute walk. Well, I want to tell you tonight that all you need is to walk after you eat. What you do when you move after a meal is you're opening your muscles back door to let sugar in. So we know that your every cell needs insulin like a key to unlock the door and let sugar in. And when you're insulin resistant, right, the door's not opening. Guess what? When you're exercising, your muscles say, I need energy now, right? And so it actually opens up, literally call it a back door. There's another pathway for sugar to enter inside the cell, even when you're insulin resistant. So it's a way of bypassing insulin resistance. So you imagine if as you're moving after you're eating, more of your cells are opening up to let sugar in. And this is very important because your muscles have the highest demand for sugar. Think about it. What is the most biologically active cell in your body? when you talk about all the different tissues in our body, what's the most demanding what demands the most energy? Your muscles, right? And even as I talk, there's so many muscles that are firing and moving, right? um and so we know that our muscles demand over 80% of the blood sugar from our foods, right? So when we eat food and the food turns into sugar, 80% of that sugar ends up in your muscles. So it's so important to work and move our muscles after we eat. Okay. And even if it's just at 15 minutes after a 15-minute walk. And this is a study that's really encouraging for those who just can only do that. So in this study compared people walking for 45 minutes, so a sustained walking long distance, versus another group of people who walked 15 minutes 3 times a day after every meal. And what they noticed is that 15 minutes post meal walking was superior to 45 minutes sustained walking in lowering the 3 hour post dinner glucose. So I'm not saying that if you're just going for long walks, it's not going to work, it's not going to help. But this study shows that even though, well, anytime you're exercising or how often you're exercising is going to help, it it does matter the timing of your exercises if you're maximizing your fasting blood sugar level improving. So if you want to improve your fasting blood sugar levels specifically, you want to walk after you eat because your 24-hour blood sugar level is going to improve, and it's more specifically your last meal 3 hours later, you're going to notice a drop in blood sugar levels because you've been walking after every meal you ate that day. Okay. So hope that makes sense. So Kitchen Waffle, and I see you. You say, yes, I need to walk more during the day. I walk in the morning. So if you could spread that out, think of different ways you can do it. Like, when we're shopping, maybe we want to make sure I always say this, park in the farthest parking lot, right? If we're going to a store after eating lunch, make sure you're maximizing the time that your feet have to move. Okay, taking the stairs and not the elevator, things like that. So try to fit movement into your life all day as much as possible. That being said, though, you know what I'm going to say. If you know me, we got to include resistance training. Muscle building workouts do matter. Okay. So I know what most, especially females, tell me, like, "Oh, I don't want to look bulky. I don't want to, get too muscular and look like a guy. I don't want to." There's, a lot of people are afraid of lifting weights. I don't know if anyone here is afraid of lifting weights for that reason, but the reality is you're not gonna get bulky by working out or build or grabbing weights, right? It takes a lot of work to build muscle. Actually, if you worked out every single day, right, or at least 5-6 days a week for an hour, you're lucky to gain 5% body muscle in a year, right? I mean, this is something that bodybuilders or weightlifters they're happy if they can gain 5% body mass, lean muscle mass in a year, right? So um if you work out 2 or 3 times a week, right, you're going to be able to gain lean muscle mass, and it's not going to make you bulky. It's going to make you stronger, right? It has so many other benefits for hormonal balance, for energy, for sleep, for longevity as a whole. But one thing it's going to improve is your insulin sensitivity. You will notice if you start to build your body's lean muscle mass that your body is better at metabolizing and absorbing sugar from your meals. So this is something I encourage all people who watch my lives, who are in our diabetes reversal program, to do. That's a big part of it. Getting into a muscle building program, right? And the only way, unfortunately, to build lean muscle is through resistance training. And so that's either you're using your body weight to work out or using actual weights to work out. Okay. So that is very important. Again, thinking of the fact that over 80% of your body's demand for sugar lies in your muscles. We need to The more muscle mass you have, the more lean fat-free muscle mass you have, the better your body is able to soak up sugar, right? So if I were to summarize what's happening, so if you think of diabetes as a sink, right? Okay, the first two steps, right? Watching our dietary intake of saturated fat, right? And our eating windows being cut off at 6 p.m. Those two steps are shutting or basically lowering the faucet's force, right? It's basically shutting the faucet off so that there's less water going into the sink of diabetes. The third step, exercise, especially resistance training that's building lean muscle mass over time, is the drain, right? And the more lean, fat-free muscle mass you have, the more your body is able to open up the drain and get any water, right, in that sink out, right? That sugar out of the sink and flush it out into the hungry muscle cells. So it's a two-way thing, right? We are shutting the faucet off by watching our dietary fat intake, by cutting off our meal times in the evening, and we are opening the drain by exercising so that our sugar has somewhere to go and it can go there quickly. So I hope that makes sense to everyone. Um, that's all the time we have. So if you have questions, if you're watching this on replay, please let me know. I always go back in the chat and look at the questions. One thing I always remind people: if you're needing help, right? If you're listening to me and you're thinking, man, I need guidance. I need personal support because I try to do this and I keep on failing for either lack of motivation, lack of knowledge, or just maybe your life is too hectic right now to be able to figure out a plan to how to put this all together. That's what our Diabetes 180 program is for. So we have free links to consultations in every description section of our videos. So go ahead and visit the description section. If that is you, if you feel like you're the person who needs personalized support to get to your goal of dropping your A1C naturally without medicine, then go ahead and book a consultation. The call is free, of course, and you'll get not only the questions that you have answered, but an opportunity to learn if private coaching is something that will work for you. All right. So, as always, beloved, I pray above all things that you may prosper and be in good health, even as your soul prospers. We'll